Where do Mike Gundy and Brent Venables currently stand at their respective jobs? And also, some big news. One of the partners of the Big 12, Endeavor, has purchased WWE. Does that mean anything at all for the Big 12 conference? Well, it could a little bit. We'll explain on today's show.
You are Locked On Big 12, your daily podcast on the Big 12 Conference, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Josh Neighbors here, Locked On Big 12 podcast. Today it is the 4th of April, 2023. Make sure you all subscribe to the channel here on YouTube. Please do so. Our goal is 4,000 subscribers by the end of the month of April. So you guys can help us do that now by subscribing to Locked On Big 12. Like the videos, leave your comments as well. Always like to hear what you all have to say. Follow us on Twitter at LOBig12. You guys can find me at JoshNeighbors_. If you guys cannot listen to the show or watch the show, I should say, you guys can listen on Apple Podcast, Stitcher, Spotify, any place you get your podcast. Leave a 5-star rating there as well. It's just great when you guys are able to engage the show, help us that way. But if you're driving and whatnot, don't watch the YouTube while you're driving. Please listen to us on whatever podcast platform you prefer. So a couple notes as we get going here. We're going through coaches right now. Yesterday, we talked about Steve Sarkisian and Neil Brown. I think the two no-doubters when it comes to hottest seats in the league. And today, we're going to focus on Mike Gundy and Brent Venables. Before we get to them, though, there was a piece of news that just recently happened. So Endeavor, which is the parent company for the UFC, it used to be WME-IMG. They own IMG Academy. They own Learfield. They own IMG Sports. They're also a talent agency as well. They purchased a controlling stake in WWE. What they're going to do is they're going to package WWE with the UFC and make it one company, one publicly traded company. I think their TKO is going to be like their, whatever they call it, the IPO name, whatever they use, their stock name. I forgot what the title is for that. This is, I've seen some people say, this is good news. The Big 12 is going to hurt the Pac-12. This is not really related to that. I think it does help the Big 12 because anytime you have a partner, and the Big 12 partners with Endeavor for social media strategy, conference align. I think it was like conference organization, and also like things like the NFTs, the gambling involvement. Like they're going to help be a conduit for the league for all those things. I think all of those things are coming. It's going to basically make it to where the Big 12, they're going to try to get in the forefront of a lot of these things. And it's going to make that transition a lot easier because Endeavor has all of these connections in all of these different spaces, and it's going to help them make that and promote that. The only way in which this helps them is that, if there's going to be some WWE wrestlers at events, UFC fighters, they haven't even done that yet. They could have done it before. They have not done that yet. Stuff like that just they can get them out to events and certain things of that nature. It does not mean anything big time. It's not going to be like, Vince McMahon is going to, billionaire strut onto the field at the Big 12 championship game and be like, welcome to Big 12 Mania. We're so glad you're here. And Vince is, he's had his own issues and just got re-involved with the WWE. But so, when you see this, Endeavor, I've heard of that from the Big 12, just know that they're adding something to our portfolio in terms of entertainment. It could be a resource the Big 12 taps into when it comes to some promotional stuff, getting big faces out at your events. We know that the Big 12 has been doing that. WME also, I think, from the talent perspective, is going to help them because they've got so many entertainment clients. Bad Bunny does wrestling. I'm not even sure if he's a WME client, but that could be somebody who you might see out of the Big 12 event. So just know that this isn't a huge deal. It's only a positive, but if it's a positive, it'd be a small positive, just with more access to people. And the one thing is, you like it when you hear a company like Endeavor that's just getting bigger and bigger. And as long as they're linked with the Big 12, it's just good news in general. So not too high, not too low, could be positive, most likely could be, would be great to see somebody besides Vince McMahon out some of your events because Vince right now is not the most well-liked person. He's got a lot of stuff going on personally. So there's that with that. Yeah. All right. So let's get to the coaching, football coaches. What we really want to talk about right now, as we kind of gear up for spring football, and we're doing it right now, and also getting ready for the 2023-2024 football season. Yesterday, I talked about the seat being hot for Steve Sarkisian. I talked about it being hot for Neil Brown, West Virginia. Although Neil Brown's, the point was like we're past hot. The volcano's erupted. It's almost cooling down. There's almost really no way to put the toothpaste back in the tube. And this one, it feels like a change is inevitable, but we'll see what happens. I mean, he could go off and they could rescue the season. And look, TCU came out of nowhere and pulled a rabbit out of the hat. It could happen. I don't think we feel good about it happening, but it could happen. The next two coaches I'm going to go to, and I'm kind of grouping these coaches together. So we talked about Neil Brown, talked about Sark, because they're kind of in this, they're definitely the seats are the hottest for them. Then I want to go to the Oklahoma coaches. So Oklahoma State and OU, because I'm not saying their seats are hot, but I think there is some eye squinting. There is a lot of questions surrounding both programs, and not saying it's all going to fall on the head man, but Brent Venables, let's just go the Oklahoma route first. All right. Brent Venables, because this one's a bit simpler. So he goes to Oklahoma, right? And he is coached in the SEC. I liked the hire at the time because I thought it would give them a good advantage, in the Big 12, because he's a guy who's coached at Oklahoma when they're in the Big 12, coached at K-State as well. He's a guy who's got those connections there. He's a good recruiter. He's from Kansas, all of these things. And so the one thing is, though, it's not his first head job, but the other thing, or it was his first head job. The other thing is, like, their defense was really bad. And so you thought, hey, maybe the defense will improve. Not the case in year one. Now, plenty of time for him to get that thing cleaned up. It's true. But at times, game management could have been game planning was a huge question. That Texas game, my God, embarrassing the way Oklahoma showed up with really, without a big plan at quarterback. The Baylor game was just like, you knew what Baylor was going to do. They're going to run a bunch of wide zone. They were not going to put the ball in Blake Shapen's hands. And they still lost that game anyway. Game was at home for OU. Felt like they should not have lost that game. Tech game got sideways for them on defense as well. Now they were dealing with a Dylan Gabriel injury, which had to be, I think, had to be thrown in there too. But the thing is, no matter how many excuses that we can make for Brent Venables, this is still the first losing season they had at Oklahoma since I think it was 1997 is what I believe, 96 or 97. That's the first time it's happened since then. And that is not something that they're accustomed to there. Now, their recruiting is still very good. They've got a bunch of really good players in there. It begs the question, though, like, what is acceptable for Oklahoma in year number two? Let's just look up any preseason top 25 for college football. All right. I'm going to go to, let's see. ESPN had one on March 13th. And this is an aggregation of this one. So let's see what ESPN has. So on March 13th, they had, let's command up Oklahoma. So Oklahoma is going to come in at number 14, right? So the expectation is already going to be high for them. Here's what they say. Bracing from its first losing season since 98, excuse me, I was wrong on that one, 98, and its first outing overall under new head coach Brent Venables, regarded as a college football premier defensive mind, but whose defense was 123rd nationally and 90th in points per game. Dylan Gabriel returns a quarterback, but he loses top receiver Marvin Mims, a 1,000-yard rusher Eric Gray. OU got some big help defensively by adding transfer lineman Trace Ford, and I think it's Dason McCullough, adding speed and physicality in the front seven. So that's a nice little snapshot right there of what OU is dealing with. They're also dealing with the fact that they're going to be transitioning from the Big 12 to the SEC here in a year. And look, I don't feel comfortable saying like what happens if they go 6-7 again. And I mentioned this yesterday, but I'm going to say this again. If you're an OU person, I've heard a lot of them saying 6-7 is not going to happen again. And look, I don't think it will, but right now, like 6-7 is what we have to judge him off of. Once again, killer recruiting. And once again, roster restructuring, sure. And he's a first-year coach. But, this does put a little bit of heat on him. Not saying the seat is fully hot and, whatever. And he's got some cachet at this school as well. He's not an outsider. He's been there before. So people trust him. But I think there is a bit of, all right, come on, let's go. In this league, we're preparing for the SEC. We should be good enough. We had a great run with Lincoln Riley, obviously. I think the frustration for a lot of folks, and rightfully so, is defensively their ineptitude, right? And we mentioned the numbers, 123rd in defense and then 93rd, or whatever it is, 90, I think 93rd in the number of points allowed, 90th points per game allowed. So That is where Oklahoma now finds themselves with a defense like that. And you think Brent Venables would change that. And you're wondering how long does it take to change something like that? We were told last year, like the way that they were tackling in practice was different. And I'm not sure if it takes long to pick up on that stuff, but they were still the bad tackling team that we saw before. The Nebraska game was like this, oh my God, look at them go. And then Adrian Martinez just ripped them to shreds I think it was the following week, right? And that game was in Norman at night. So there's a lot happening here. And I think this year is more of a sorting out year for Brent Venables. I don't think they can him. I don't think that's the direction they want to go. I don't think they want to hire another football coach. I think 6-6 is going to put him in a really bad position, but I think it matters of how that looks, right? Not all 6-6s are created equally. There could be injuries, all of these things, but you got to keep an eye on it because that was a disappointing season and they've reloaded talent wise. And this team should not be a 6-7 football team. That team should have been either in this league. This league has gotten better. Last year was the best top to bottom league in this conference. I think a lot of us can remember, at least in the last decade or so, with how well Kansas played, how good Iowa State's defense was, despite them being bad. Baylor has a down year, but still wins 6 games, pushes TCU to the brink. Kansas State, obviously, great season. Even West Virginia pulled out some nice wins there, right? They did the double. I think they beat both Oklahoma schools, if I remember correctly. And so, even both Oklahoma schools still went to bowl games, right? Texas had a decent season. Texas Tech had a really great year. Kansas had a nice year. Like there was something you could say about every single team. West Virginia's, probably the worst one out of all of them, but still, like at the end of the day, it was a team that was semi-competitive in some games. And once again, I'm not gonna say the entire league was great last year, but like they had teams that could beat some teams in the league most weeks of the year. So this group should be better this year. This group should be better in this league. I think it's worth 100% putting some heat on and be like, all right, we expect to be in the Big 12 title chase this year with this roster. I think they're going to be selected towards the top of the league. I think OU, Texas, TCU, and K-State are all going to find themselves towards the top. Now, the good news is that the trend is kind of on their side, right? Last few years, we've been cycling through schools, in the Big 12 championship game. And even before that, they were dominant. So like there's been some turnover, and before the turnover, they were dominant. So they can maybe be part of the turnover and help return to their dominance. Of course, they won't be in the league for much longer. But yeah, I think from a roster standpoint, once again, them and Texas will be up there. It's just a matter of, can Brent Venables, what did he learn from year one about pulling the right strings? And I think there's a lot that he took from that. I think you listen to his press conferences and you can tell there's a lot he took from that. And so what happens with the coordinators, obviously, I think that Jeff Lebby was about as hot of a name as we had, and then injuries happened. Dylan Gabriel didn't play as well. So a lot of questions, but I think a lot of them were learning but learning in that league last year. Dylan Gabriel's first time in a bigger league, right? In a Power 5 league. Brent Venables' first time as a head coach. Jeff Lebby, a lot of pressure on him there. So I am willing to not absolve him, but say, I think it's worth the note. Like they could have, Dave Aranda did it at Baylor. Why couldn't Brent Venables do this at Oklahoma? It's very reasonable to think that he could have a down year and then they could win 10, 11 games this year, but we haven't seen him do it yet. So if you want to ask that question, totally fair. Once again, I'm not claiming the seat is super hot. I just think this situation is more cut and dry of like, he learned, he learned, and there are certain things that I think we can definitely expect to see. Dylan Gabriel must be better. Up front on defense, they want to be better. Tackling needs to improve. The defense has to create some more turnovers this season, put the offense in better spots. And I think all of those things are stuff that you hope that they check off. And so I feel like he's a bit easier to grade this year, and we'll see how things shake out. If they go 8-4, it's we're improving 8-4. It's like we didn't beat the big dogs 8-4. Then you're a little bit, you're saying, where are we heading with this? Right? 6-6, you start and say, all right. Well, serious concern. I'm not sure if they can him. Depends on how that 6-6 or 6-7 looks. And that bowl game will be important because back-to-back losing seasons does not happen at OU very often. Right. But if they go 9-3, 10-2 in the Big 12 title game, I think you're like, all right, he learned. He's learning still. All coaches should be learning. They should be adapting, should be evolving. But I'm very interested to see what BV looks like this year. And I think it's totally fair to say there is a moderate amount of pressure on BV. All right, quick word from our sponsors on today's show. Today's Locked On Big 12 podcast is brought to you all by Built Bar. Go to built.com today. That's built.com. That's where you guys can find Built Bars, Built Go, Built Boost. Built Bars are delicious. They're good. They're good for you. They're low on sugar, high on protein, and they're delicious. Once again, covered in 100% real chocolate. You guys can find them at Sam's Club now in the 13 pack. Or if you want something smaller, you guys can go to Walmart and get the 4 packs. But I'm telling you what, I'm getting that 13 pack, brother. I'm getting that 13 pack at Sam's Club. Once again, built.com, Sam's Club, Walmart. That's where you guys can find the delicious Built Bars. All right, so this is the more difficult one of the two. Mike Gundy is coming into this year for Oklahoma State with a very interesting situation. It's been a while. I forgot the final count on the amount of players that they lost, but they come off a 7-6 season. They lost in the Guaranteed Rate Bowl to Wisconsin. That is on the heels of a 12-2 season where they won the Fiesta Bowl, right? Finished number 7 in the country. For that, 8-3. Before that, 8-5. Before that, 7-6. Then 3 10-3 seasons in a row. 7-6, 10-3. I mean, look, he's a consummate winner. So here is what's interesting about Mike Gundy is that there is no conventional. He is not on a conventional hot seat because he has been such a successful coach at Oklahoma State. He has, I think a good comp might be Wisconsin. He has almost turned them into the Wisconsin of the Southwest area. You know, Oklahoma's south, Southwest to Midwest, South, whatever you guys want to call it. That is a consistent winning program that oftentimes can win 10 games. They can compete for conference championships. I know some big wins have really eluded him. I know he's taken a lot of heat for how that has gone. But with that being said, with how good of a job they've done of winning, is that he is old school, 55 years old, but still old school in his approach, right? The one thing that we heard about after the COVID season in 2021 was how happy he was they were able to scrimmage as much as they did. They scrimmaged a ton. The one issue they've been dealing with recently, and I don't know if these two things are related. I didn't play football at a high level. I didn't play football, hardly ever. I mean, I've followed it like my entire life, but never played at any kind of high level. The one thing that I don't know if this is linked or not, and I'd love to have somebody tell me their thoughts on this, but like the amount of time that they get after it might cultivate some strong minds, some strong players, but they have gotten crushed with injuries in the last couple of years, whether it be quarterback, whether it be wide receiver, whether it be defense. The secondary for them has been absolutely, just decimated. And for them last year, they were so, I said this a bunch. Spencer Sanders was the most valuable player in the entire Big 12 conference because of what he meant to that team. And you could maybe say, well, Dylan Gabriel is too, but yeah, I mean, at their peak with Spencer Sanders, this team was rocking and rolling. Guys, they had TCU, just dead to rights. They had them dead to rights in that game. And that's where I think that's the game where Spencer got nicked up and picks up the injury. Offense stalls in the second half. They can't keep putting it on them. And it's a disaster for them. At least to finish that game was. And things really tailed off for them last year. And then with obviously that West Virginia loss, which was strange. They had that loss, to Wisconsin in the bowl game where everything was swirling around about, hey, Spencer Sanders might have asked to be back on the team, but they moved on. Spencer had to move on. Talks about, obviously the coordinator situations. They had Derek Mason leaves the team, and then they have to go and get, I totally forgot this guy's name, the new Oklahoma State DC. Brian Nardo, right, who comes from, just obscurity, but this could be a diamond in the rough. They're going to hit the portal hard, which they have already. There's questions about the quarterbacking situation as it stands going into, they get Alan Bowman and is that going to be your guy? Is he going to challenge the job? What's really happening? Because they got Garrett Rangel, who, kind of looked outclassed at times, just like he wasn't ready last year. So they've got and Gunnar Gundy too, but what are you supposed to be doing with that? Right. He was involved in the quarterback situation last year. And so, last year was kind of a mess. It was kind of a mess because they didn't have a backup plan at quarterback. Garrett Rangel just was not ready to handle it. Their defense was not good enough. They got really banged up, a lot of injuries. And so the losing part of it is excusable. Although I felt like there's some games where just like the effort was not fantastic at times. But like, if you want to put it on the injuries, you can. The roster management part of it is very, very difficult because it appears if Mike Gundy maintains his tact towards players, he might have to be doing a lot of cleaning house often. And look, people might say, well, he's gonna get the kind of guys that want to play from that. Sure. But like, that's not always going to be the case. That cannot always be the case. Like in recruiting, you are going to pitch something to, this happens every single school in America, not just Oklahoma State, but you're going to pitch something to certain guys. You're like, look, not every kid's a hard nose, put your head down, work your tail off, no talk, all play, just every, not worry about NIL, not worry about any of that, get a number of targets, all that stuff. That's not how like a majority of that you can't expect every kid to be wired like that. There aren't a ton of talented kids who are all wired, like just not enough of them, especially at Oklahoma State. They do a great job of getting really decent talent, but their development is what I think sets them apart. They develop guys into, NFL caliber players at multiple positions. Rodriguez is a great, Hot Rod is a great example of this. Malcolm Rodriguez, that's their calling card. And so you are potentially facing a situation, if you kind of keep up this tact where you're like, I don't care about kids' futures. They and their representatives will take care of that. The game's changing. The game is changing, and you do have to adapt with it. While he's built this amazing program, you are not Nick Saban. You are not Kirby Smart. You are not, you're not at schools like those. You are not at a school where you are winning at that clip where the resume, the record, the putting guys in the league, it all stands for itself, and you're going to get everybody. And you can basically have your pick of the litter. And if kids want to transfer, you're fine because you've got backup. Help is right there all the time. It's just not like that. So if you take that abrasive attitude, you might have to be deconstructing and reconstructing your roster often. And the thing with that is you are not going to, number one, you're going to have to do a bit of that already. Number two, you don't want to put it on a much larger scale because number three, your hit rate on that is going to be lower because either if you're bringing kids up from a league, maybe they're just not fit to play. Maybe they just don't gel. Maybe the kid doesn't like the school, and these are still kids. Academics are just a bit different for them. Your personalities don't get along. Whatever it is, it's just not gonna gel for you all the time if you're having to do a mass reconstruction on the scale they just did last year. So this is where it's not like Mike Gundy's on the hot seat, but I think what we're all watching is and I'm going to say this, and I think it's pretty honestly, maybe the best coach in this league. I think there's a very legitimate claim for him to, if you look at his body of work overall, guys, there is not a more successful head coach in this league. The only other coach who can maybe hold a candle to him is Gus Malzahn, now coming over as the coach of the UCF Knights. And I think still Auburn regrets that firing even to this day. I think he's the only guy in terms of resume that can hold a candle right now to what Mike Gundy's overall body of work is. Maybe some guys have some higher highs, but the overall body of work in terms of program building, I know Les Miles didn't do a horrible job there, but still, Mike Gundy built Oklahoma State football into what it is today. And so I think the frustrating part if you're an Oklahoma State fan is like, we know you can coach. We know you're a good coach, coach. We know you can do it. Can your attitude be a bit different? And look, I'm not saying that all Oklahoma State fans think this way. I think some people like his attitude, but from talking to Cody Stovall and thinking about some of the other coaches, there is a definite conversation around his attitudes towards certain things. And look, he might pull a rabbit out of the hat this year with the coach. It may not be just rabbit. It might just be, hey, I did a great job, evaluating Brian Nardo, and he's going to do a great job. And we're all going to be like, wow, Mike Gundy is great. But here's the thing, like that would fall in line with the coaching job that he has done. But the issue is not the coaching job. It's the approach, not the on-field coaching. It's the ego management part of it, which used to be a check your ego at the door, come here and work. And you can still have that kind of attitude, but you can't be like, oh, we'll hear from his representatives. Spencer Sanders gave everything to that program, a full 4 years. And whatever disagreements he had at the end, I'm sure there is some fault on both sides. But to not leave the door open for a kid who's that good to come back, man, Spencer Sanders is now scrapping for the job at Ole Miss. It should not be like this. It should not be Garrett Rangel fighting against Alan Bowman for the quarterback job. And once again, there's probably some blame on both sides. But a part of this, if Mike Gundy had really expressed, I want Spencer Sanders back, he could have had him back. That's a guy who lit up Notre Dame in their bowl game. It's a guy who led them to a Big 12 championship game where they were inches away from winning. A guy who was first team all Big 12, a guy who had them at 7-0 last year before that injury that he took. And whatever you want to say about it, he gave a full college career. That guy left it all out there in terms of on the field. There are no doubts about that guy. You chased him off. You did chase, or maybe it was a mutual chasing, but you had a chance to get him back. And you did. You might say, well, Josh, it's one player. Yeah, but there were complaints from Stephon Johnson Jr. And then there were complaints from, I think was it Presley, one of the Presley, or I forget which kid it was, the running back / wide receiver they had, about where he was being used. And like kids have these complaints all the time. But a bunch of kids hit the portal. Trace Ford went to Oklahoma, and their defense was awful last year. I know maybe he's a really good coach, but like this is the issue that you're having, is that these guys are leaving. And Oklahoma State should be a program kids go to aspire to play at. In my opinion, it's a top 25 program. It is a top 25 program in America. Every single year, they are going to bowl games. They're winning 8 games a lot of years, and they've got a ton of 10-win seasons, all sandwiched in there as well in Mike Gundy's run. The big question is demeanor, and it's tough to change at 55. Change is hard for a lot of us, but does the demeanor for him change? Because if not, they might still keep winning 7, 8 games, but man, 10, 11, 12 wins is going to be tough if you're shuffling the deck all the time because you're a hard ass and you're hard to play for. Coach can be hard to play for, demanding, and still, do a bit of ego massaging, right? You can do it all, but it can't just be a one-way street. It cannot be my way or the highway 120% of the time anymore. It's just not going to work. And that's what I'm excited to see. That's what I'm excited to see about Mike Gundy this year, is what can he do? Because I think we're all sleeping on him. I think I'm sleeping on a little bit too. And that's a team that I'm fired up to see what it looks like in 2023. How much buy-in is there? And the thing is, they might be really good this year, but when, I think it's beyond this season too. Like, this team might have the FU nobody believes in us thing in them, and they might do well because of that. What happens when it's not the case with that? What happens when it's a chance to get a bit more glitz and glam players who might be interested in your program because you keep putting up good seasons and you're in the college football playoff and they're going to be in it? I mean, if they keep, performing, last year's season would have put them in the CFP. They would have been there if we had a 12-teamer, right? So, this is the big thing, is if it's not an FU team, us against the world, nobody's saying we're going to be good. Maybe he can convince his players that that's going to be the case every single year, but I don't think that's going to be the case. How does he manage all of those? I'm very excited to see that. But Oklahoma State, a lot of interesting things to look out for in 2023 when it comes to those coaching situations, because Oklahoma State has a chance to go into the new Big 12 as one of the power programs because of how good of a job Mike Gundy has done over the years. Oklahoma, the Jordan brand on their shirt, with the domination that they had the Big 12 in recent memory, feels like they can go into that league and start being one of the teams that competes. But they haven't been that team the last 2 seasons. So I think it's begging a lot of questions right now about kind of where everything is heading for both these programs. I'm not saying there's a massive dip coming, but legitimate questions to ask for both. That's why I find them so compelling. That's why we just did 30 minutes on those 2 schools. That will do it for today's show. Make sure you guys follow me on Twitter at LOBig12 for the show. At JoshNeighbors_ is where I am. Make sure you guys subscribe to the podcast. Appreciate when you guys do that. Once again, the goal is 4,000 subscribers by the end of April. Help us get there. Please do so today. And make sure you guys find the podcast wherever you get your podcast. All right, my friends. Till next time, as always, stay safe.